Hey, everybody. Welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. I'm James Quesada.
And I'm Bob Wick.
And we are live
for
another Q&A episode on a Sunday here, which is our intention loosely to do this every Sunday or try to do more live episodes. And when we do that, to make them Q&A episodes or just look for any engagement. If people have questions, that's just something that we'd really like to get from audiences, is questions that improvisers have, so that we're not just answering topics that are on our mind, but also on the mind of people who are, in the pandemic break of improv and still having questions or mulling things over in their heads. What keeps you up at night in the improv world? Of all the things that are going on in the world, which improv topics are keeping you up?
Congratulations if that's all you're thinking about.
Yeah. So we have some questions that were previously submitted that we didn't get a chance to answer in a regular episode, and we'll start with those. But as we go on, if there are audience members that would like to submit questions, all you need to do is drop them in the comments. We will see them and make time for them in our episode here. Before we get started, quick couple shout outs to one, Diff.
Yeah.
The Detroit Improv Festival, which would have otherwise been happening this past week, Wednesday through today, would have been the last day of workshops and hangovers. And so shout out to Diff, and looking forward to getting a proper year 10 of Diff next year in lieu of having one this year. Also, shout out to Mark Evan Jackson and Paul F. Tompkins, who are doing a show tonight. They did a live episode as part of a weekend of support toward the Detroit Creativity Project. They had a Detroit Creativity Project show last night, and they're going to do one more show tonight, which will be Mr. Jackson, Mr. Tompkins, which is Mark Evan Jackson and Paul F. Tompkins doing a duo. They'll do that as a virtual show tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And tickets are still available, of course, because it's virtual.
Yeah, because they're limitless.
There's no capacity. Right. So you can go to houseseats.com, I want to say, houseseats.live for tickets to that show. Or you can go to paulftompkins.com/live and scoop up some tickets. I actually have tickets to watch.
Oh, I'm watching that tonight. I'm definitely watching that tonight.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I've actually, I know they've toured around a little bit, but I have not seen them do their duo show.
No, it's always so hard to get in during Diff. So
yeah.
My first time seeing them together. That's gonna be great.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool. Okay, so now that that's taken care of, it is time to get into our questions and the answers associated with them.
Nightmare-inducing questions have been on for months.
It's time to get some rest, some final peace, baby, as we answer these troublesome questions about improv. I will also say that Bob and I will have to apologize for losing track of which people belong to which questions on our list here, because we kind of separated them for other ways of using them in episodes. And so we have the questions, but I just couldn't track down who belonged to which question. So shout out to anybody who submitted a question so far. Thank you very much for doing that.
I really appreciate the help.
Yes. Yeah. And these are really great questions. So, yeah. So let's start with the first one here, which is what is the best way to use real life stories in scenes? How can you use real life stories in your improv?
Oh, that's a really great question. And I'm trying to avoid I statements, but it's something I do a lot of. I like to use my real life because it's something I'm familiar with. I know that if I initiate a character or take something out of my life, interject it into an improv scene, I'll definitely have reference points, and it kind of makes your job easier. And I think it's something we do naturally as humans. Like when you tell a story, I know most of my friends do almost impersonations of the person they're telling the story about, especially if they're doing a quote or something. So
Yeah.
it's a great way to excuse me, pick a character. If you have a funny, if you get a suggestion of dentist and you have uncle who's a dentist, do an impression of your uncle. Or if you have someone who's afraid of the dentist, do an impersonation of that person and make it your own character. And ingrain that into your improv scene, and then you can have a really fun scene. It might not have anything to do with a dentist other than what your reference is to that person, but it's when you get a suggestion, it's only a suggestion. It's supposed to inspire you, so use that for inspiration.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that is keep it as inspiration and not as a plan, because if you have a real life experience and you're like, oh man, last time I went to a theme park, this happened and so threw up and it was this whole ordeal. You can start a scene from a place of like you said, impersonating someone that you encountered or that or like start a scene doing something that you did the last time that you were at that location or in that situation or around that type of occupation, whatever the suggestion is. But don't expect it to go the way that it did in your real life experience. You have to start from a place of that's the inspiration I'm taking, and let's see where it goes in this new world, not trying to steer it into the same thing that happened last time in your real life.
Have you ever had, have you ever had anybody do that to you? Like, well, actually, when this happened to me in my real life, this happened. Like, I wasn't there. I don't know.
You mean somebody say that in a scene?
No, after a scene, like, well,
oh,
actually,
yes. Yeah. Yep. Yes. In classes too. It'd be like, well, actually, I've been to the DMV just a couple weeks ago, and what happened was, and it's like, yeah, but that's okay. You don't have to. That is not. That's not the point of what we're doing. Yeah. So I think that's really maybe I don't know if that's at the heart of the issue for the person that asked it, but like I think that there is a stigma around taking shortcuts or like cheating with real life experience. And I think that where the line is drawn is that like you should use your real life experience. That's what makes your perspective unique. And the reason that we use suggestions is for things to come up that and that have happened to you as a starting point. So it's okay to draw on your real life experience, and you should, but you should not try to keep it in your real life as the scene goes on. You should use it as a starting place.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. And I suppose the other way that we'll mention, which I don't think is necessarily the question, but just in case it is, you can use real life stories in long form in a format that people call monologue deconstruction, otherwise known as Armando or ASCAT. And that would be where you get a suggestion and someone from the ensemble tells a real life story and anecdote to the audience, and then the ensemble hears that story and does scenes inspired by different details and aspects of it, pulling it in different directions for inspiration in scenes.
Yeah.
Okay. Tom's joining us. Welcome back, Tom.
Yay. Our regular.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Is Brad with him?
Yeah. Where is Brad? So our next question is going to be about voices and accents. The question is, what's the best way to practice voices and accents? Which I think is a great question because for a lot of reasons, but especially now, I think like like voices, accents, dialogue, things that are like voice acting driven, and also object work are things that, like, if you're getting antsy and just like, I want to, like, when this pandemic is over, I want to come back a whole new improviser, then those are things that you can kind of practice and tweak on your own. And there is a lot of voice acting and voiceover stuff going on because it is a home studio activity. So I think this is a great question for especially now, how to practice voices and accents. And typically the advice that I give, just I guess as a starting place, my go-to advice is to take books, like children's books. In forensics, speaking and acting, they have a category called storytelling, and that's something that I did, and I coached for a long time when I was coaching. And what we would do is we would get a pile of like 30 kids books from the library and put them on a table, and we just go around starting to read them out loud and doing different voices, and like, you want to have a unique animated voice for each character that gets introduced. And so that's how we would kind of like play around with finding those voices, and sometimes we would use them for the book that we're reading because that's where it came from, or other times we'd be like, oh, I don't think I want to use this story for performance, but I know I want to use that voice. And so I think that's a really nice way is if you just have a small stack of books, whether it's adult fiction or young adult or whatever, children's lit. The main reason I say children's lit is because it's more like folk and fairy tale style. So there's more, I guess, dynamics, and they're also shorter, more bite size to thumb through. So that's what I would do.
Plus the point of view is very heavy handed. So voices. All right. Something I do, and it kind of annoys Natalie. I only get mad. Like I'm pretty even tempered, I would say. I do have my peaks and valleys, but I'm at my worst when I'm in the car. So one of the things that I do is impersonate other drivers who annoy me. Like I get in their mannerism. Like I don't do it to their face. It's just me throwing a tantrum after, like, oh, this guy sounds like I don't know how to use my turn signal. Like, and I just will sustain that character and just have fun with it. It's a good way to let off steam. And going back to like what we were talking about before, like using people in your real life, trying to put them in situations where they might be a fish out of water. If you have someone you like to tease, or not tease, but impersonate because they're a fun character. What would it be like if like almost every impersonator starts off their bit like, what would be like if so and so was working at Starbucks? It might sound like this, like the 80s type impersonator. So having fun with it, taking the stress off yourself and trying to hit like a perfect impersonation or a perfect voice. And just having fun with it, make a game out of it, I would say, then trying to sustain that. And then I forgot, I think it was Heather who mentioned like, and then go try to read Shakespeare in that voice and see how it works, because that's usually an imposed position or
juxtaposition.
Thank you.
Okay.
Words. The contrast will make it interesting and fun, and you.
Yeah. And if you can maintain a voice through something as dense and stylistic as Shakespeare, then you have a voice that has a life of its own.
Absolutely.
But
with and didn't they mention accents as well?
Yeah, accents, dialects. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm, me personally, I'm not a strong accent person, but I have found there are really great YouTube tutorials, which, if you're at home, this is probably one of the best ways to learn like unique accents, very specific ones, just going through the voice acting tutorials. And there are a lot of great teachers out there that can help you with that. Yeah.
And I think that if I'm not mistaken, it comes down heavily to vowel sounds is where dialects and accents come from. So there's lots of starter YouTube videos on the subject of vowel sounds, and what do you call it? There's sentences that you can practice that have every vowel sound, every English speaking vowel sound in a sentence, and you can use that as kind of a touchstone for the accent that you're working on. So I would start by looking at a couple of videos that are about accents and vowel sounds. And then yeah, I there also, the beauty of YouTube is that you can find, you know, Australian, Irish, people with authentic accents
Right.
that are vlogging and doing YouTube videos. It's so easy to find that in the YouTube online video sphere that you can like also mimic and mirror what those are. Great. Anything else to add for that?
Nope, that's all my tricks. Just
Those-
drive around and get mad.
Yeah, that's funny. That reminds me of Joe Hengelberg. He would come off of a drive where he, you know, had some, not road rage, but like, you know, something stupid happened. And I just remember as soon as you said that, there was one instance where he came in probably to the Go Bar and was just singing, "I can drive a truck faster than you. I can drive a truck faster than you." And I was like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "Oh, it's just stuck in my head because I got cut off by this truck driver, and that's what I was saying in my head to imagine what he was thinking when he cut me off."
It's helpful, man.
Yeah. Great. Our next question is going to be, I'm almost positive this came from Trevor, but I could be falsely shouting him out right now. The question is whether you go through phases of interest in the type of improv that you like to do and the type of improv that you like to see.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I like when when I heard that question, I thought of you because you're always somebody who's like, "What's next? What's new? What can I do different?" And I'm
Yeah.
pretty much the same way. I have a strong base, but I want to reach out, and I'm always adding more color to my palette. Like, what else can I do with my style, or just in this room that we're playing in, because I've seen so many performers who basically do the same 5 or 6 things every time you see them, and sometimes it can be really entertaining, but after a while, like, I've seen it, like part of the fun of watching it, like a long form set, or just improv in general, is the surprise. And if I know all your tricks, it's going to be harder and harder to surprise me, so it becomes less and less entertaining.
Yeah, that's true. When it comes to seeing stuff, yeah, sometimes it is like whether it's maybe something like the new launch group or new house teams in general, or a new show, improvised show that's like launching or whatever. I'll go see it. I always want to see it more than once, whether it's a new player or a new show or a new team, because you gotta get it's improv. You can't get a feel for it in just one instance. But yeah, once I've seen it a few times, then I'll be like, okay, I feel like I know what this is about, and if it really interests me because of the style or whatever, I might keep going to see it. But even if I'm like, I like it, but I've seen it, then yeah, I agree. Then I'll kind of look for something that I haven't seen as much or yet.
I really like watching like class shows when it's like the first couple semesters where they're just learning stuff, and it's their first show. Of course, mistakes are going to happen, but these are mistakes that I learned were mistakes because there's a list of rules that I learned, and I compare that list of rules to what's on stage.
Sure.
And I love it when they break 100 rules and the scene's great. Like, shame on me for having this list in the back of my head. And I love it. And I love when people, do stuff that's, not, I don't know, I don't want to say a mistake, but they just do stuff in a organically in an unusual way, or stuff I haven't seen because, maybe it didn't work one time when someone else did it. So like, I love being surprised. I love being like told out like that list in the back of your head is bullshit and
Yeah,
myself.
absolutely.
I love
Yeah,
that. So I really enjoy when someone's that so fine tuned that they never make a mistake. I hope for mistakes because you can really double down on it and make something interesting and unique.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess I'll like in terms of interest, I'll kind of go back and forth between like wanting to see uh bread and butter improv done at its finest, which I would say is like either a herald or a montage, you know,
Okay. Yeah.
no real bells and whistles, just scene by scene, the kind of stuff that you see with like speaking of the diff all stars, where it's just like here's some great improvisers that are on stage together, and then you kind of default to a montage, and it's just about, you know, the scene by scene, and there's some nice callbacks or whatever. But seeing that at a really high level, with a really well established team, you know, like the 313, or to see a herald done by a team like King 10,
Right.
um, uh, those like standards, you know, montage and herald, I think are just like the improv standards, and I will go out of my way to find that done at the highest level sometimes, and then other times I'll look for stuff that I have never seen, and I don't care how good or bad it is or who's doing it. I'm just
Yeah.
like, what are they going to try to do? And that's what I'm
Or what
interested
can
in.
I steal? Even if I don't like something,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Well, look
oh, I like the intent, but if I would have done it, I would have done it this way. Well, then do it.
yeah, to get inspiration, because I think that's
Exactly.
where the phases of interest come from, is like
Yeah.
you kind of looking to either break the rules, that list in the back of your head, or think of things that you haven't thought of yet, and get inspired to try things out or approach things in a different way, for your own performance. And speaking of which, so when it comes to phases of interest of what I would like to do as a performer, I go through those all the time too. Usually in
Oh yeah.
longer arcs, with like little mini things. Like, and what I mean is that I went through a couple of years of wanting to perform very physical, like a cartoon character, and be as like abstract and animated as possible. I went through a couple of years of really focusing on playing the straight character. Um, and once I kind of felt like I got as much as I can for the time being out of exercising that, then I'll move on to the next thing. And I think more recently it's been like meta play and how to like engage the whole room, or kind of like break absurdity and surrealism, break into that during a show, and kind of have trippy things happen. Um, and then, you know, while I'm heavily focusing on that, I might need a break from it, and then I'll try something else on the side or in a show or whatever. So again, it's like these long arcs of a couple of years of trying to do something, a style really well, and then needing a break from it every once in a while.
I'm glad you said break because I I've been in the position where I've done that stuff, like gave myself a challenge, and sometimes the challenges are really hard, and there's stuff I'm still working on. Like I have an issue with eye contact, which I always have to remind myself, like make sure you're making eye contact because I think I normally I like to focus on the room rather than the individuals, but that's kind of bullshit. I have to you know, you gotta click it, especially like now that I'm doing a 2-man, like I have to make sure like I'm checking in with Chris as much as possible.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, and there's like things I've picked up, like, you know, by watching other improv. I'm like, oh, I would like to try to incorporate that, and it came a little bit more natural, so I didn't have to do as much time developing that. And then it got to the point where it became not a crutch, but something something I was doing too
A habit,
often,
a
and it
habit.
wasn't,
Yeah.
habit
It's a
that
default.
really
Yeah.
wasn't paying off as much as I would like it to. So I like, you have to put that back on the improv shelf, take a step back. Is there any other way I could, like, you know, try to figure out if there's any other way you can use it, or, you know, any other interesting approach that it can be used for, or is it something you just need to put to rest until it's needed?
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to check in with that too. I would think with all things, just habit. Is it a habit or is it a choice? Is like the
Right.
one of the biggest constant questions for growth in performance. Um, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to the next one. We have a question about callbacks. Is it possible to overdo callbacks? I think is in a nutshell what the question is. Can you overdo callbacks? And probably how do you find a balance between, um, you know, successfully having callbacks and connections in your show and overdoing it? What is the balance?
I think you can overdo anything.
Yeah.
There's gotta be like, but if we're talking about callbacks, of course you can. You know, I think there's the balance is it still fun? Is it still fun for everybody in that room? Is it fun for you? Is it fun for the performer, the other performers? Is it fun for the audience? Because if it's still fun, you know, there's the rule of three and there's the rule of 77. You know, and if you can still
Yeah.
if you can still step on all the rakes and it's still funny, they keep on stepping on rakes. You know, but if it's just something that you're doing because the first couple times you did it was funny and you're trying to get it back, you're trying to bring back the magic of this callback, and it's not happening, put it to rest, maybe bring it back at the end. It might be the blow line, or it just might not be something that the audience wants to see anymore, because part of your job is to entertain. And if it's not, the moves you're making, not that every move you make has to be entertaining or funny, right? But it has to have momentum. It has to push the scene forward. And, you know, trying to beat a dead horse is the worst way to do that.
Yeah. And so I agree with all that. And I think that the probably the way to figure out where the balance is in a practical sense is to do it more. I would rather encourage improvisers, students, or on a coaching on a team, if they're like, how do we find the sweet spot for callbacks? I would encourage them to do callbacks a lot, and kind of that learn by trial and error where's too much, because I would rather see high volume callbacks and then scale it back than try to like baby step your way up to the right amount. I think that it can be a little it can feel more clumsy and kind of uncomfortable, like having a callback that just falls flat in those high volume instances. But I think that's worth the like, I don't think that worked. You know,
Right.
That feeling, I think, is a better learning tool than the like, maybe I could have done one more.
Right.
You know, you don't know because you didn't try.
Yeah. And then on callbacks too, like maybe trying to, well, most callbacks are big moments that you're rehashing. Try to find something more specific, something maybe if there was like a throwaway line at the beginning of the scene, trying to use that again, not to try to double down. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but what I mean is trying to find something very specific, something very unique, something that may not have been memorable, but definitely is memorable as soon as you say it again, because that would be more of a reveal to it than just like, oh, remember that one time I said, and that's what she said, you know, like maybe not the jokey part, but maybe something more unique to that character, you know?
Yeah. Because it's not just about using the same word or the same phrase multiple times. A callback can come in many forms, and I think,
Right.
yeah, exactly what you're saying is to explore different ways of doing that, because I think that you can get you always want to surprise the audience. You know, it's very satisfying to do something that they expect to see, but to do it in a way that's unexpected is even better. And yeah, I think that you know, maybe people get hung up early on about like, is a callback as simple as using the suggestion a bunch of times, um, and that's different from like, you know, a blow line of a scene being reused again. But instead of the blow line is like, well, what type of what happened there, it was about someone, you know what I mean? Like you can just get more and more
Yeah.
broad with the type of callback, um, and scene mapping. There's a lot to play around with. So just diversify the way that
Yeah.
you're doing it. Do too much before you scale it back, I think is the quickest way to get to that sweet spot. Yeah.
Yeah. I think my favorite type of not blow line, callback is when something's established, or when there's a line that's almost a throwaway line, and then after everything's established, if you say the line again, it becomes like almost an act of foreshadowing. Like, oh, remember I told you this was gonna happen, and then because that's interesting to me because you made all this up, so how could you possibly foreshadow something when you have no idea where it's going? So when it comes back, it's like, oh, what a nice little bow you made.
Yeah. So, and I suppose again, it's like you can, I think it is fair to manufacture callbacks,
Yep.
and to consciously set things up, but again, it shouldn't look like that's what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's probably better 9 times out of 10 to have it happen organically. So, you can look for ways to make it happen, but you can also keep your eye out for opportunities to, make a callback based on something that's presenting itself.
I think that's what I like about it, because the performer who did it was paying attention to everything that was going on, and called back something that was so minute. Like, that's what I like about it.
Yeah, it's and it's like, this is a little bit off topic, but like let me see if I can get this out before I lose the thread entirely. But
No, I see you going through the files.
yeah, but you deeper into the show, you can make justifications or explain things that happen using things that we know so far. Earlier on in the show, you're like, I got to make some answers and create some explanations for who this character is and why, and what happened in this scene and why. But then later in the show, you have everything you need to explain anything using what's already happened. So that's on the topic of callbacks. But then I think the also nice rule of thumb is that, like, at a certain point in a show, the goal stops being to create anything new and becomes how to expand and reuse stuff that you've already done.
Everything we already created. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. That's a fun topic too, is just
It is.
Probably do a whole episode on creating new things versus reusing what you have, repurposing what you have in a show. Okay, let's see here. So our next question is about character tropes, and if I remember this right, the question is about how to effectively use character tropes, whether you should lean into them, or how to play into a genre show using character tropes to your advantage, but not getting stuck in lame cliches. I think that was the nature of the question. And if it's not, we're on a whole different topic.
But thank you for the inspiration.
Yeah. Does that ring a bell though? Do you think I'm right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And when I thought about that, I thought about the have you ever seen the movie Clue?
Yeah.
So Tim Curry's the butler.
Yeah.
Like how so throughout the whole movie, because we're so familiar with how a crime story or a whodunit movie is supposed to go, and we're familiar with what the butler's role in that movie is supposed to be, like the unreliable narrator, sorry, that when you get to the end and he does all three endings, and you find out he's the killer, like it's always fun. Like it's
Yeah.
playing on something. It's playing on what we know or what we're going to assume because we're familiar with a genre, and then turning it on its ear. Like I like that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess a general starting point for the question is about the fact that tropes or cliches are not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're playing in genre. They can be
Yeah.
a delight. And that's the point of playing genre, right? So if you're setting yourself up for doing narrative, and obviously if you're doing a specific genre, then yeah, you really need to embrace those types of tropes, and start by using them at face value, using them for what they are, get familiar, comfortable in their skin, and then you can the more familiar you are with honoring the elements of that genre, the easier it will become to find your own nuances in those go-tos. You make them unique. Because we still in Disney movies, Pixar, DreamWorks stuff, it's all the same stuff over and over and over again. But there's little character details that come from taking the base trope and then being like, well, what about this time if they had this quirk or had a soft spot for this, or couldn't do this. Just taking everything that's familiar about that trope and then being like, well, one thing we always see, what if we took it away or made a rule that it had to be the opposite of what we expect?
Right. Like in Shrek when the princesses start fighting, or stuff like stuff we're not used to seeing, but it's totally plausible. Like why wouldn't they, not be able to fight? Or like another example would be,
I mean, real quick,
the musical. What?
Yeah. Shrek is even an awesome example because the hero is an ogre. Usually the hero is a handsome, knight or whatever. So
right,
that even just to begin with is doing it from the ugly, usually villain character's perspective as a hero is a great way to turn things. But sorry,
no, I like that. Another example is like Blank the musical. Like how often have we seen things that were traditionally not musicals turn into musicals? Like Hamilton, like taking a historical biography and adding music to it, and you have like the biggest hit ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Mixing elements. Yeah, I like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. You're more of the narrative minded person, Bob. Is there anything else when it comes to like tropes? What about like when hitting kind of checkpoints in a story that like I'm trying to think of an example, but like if you're doing like a fantasy adventure thing that like, oh, there's supposed to be a point where there's the mystical guide or whatever, and that's a character, but like that's also something that's supposed to happen, is that the hero is supposed to get guidance.
Yes.
Or like if we don't get the moment of like crossing the threshold, like
him learning how to use his powers, if that's something new, or like or winning the first battle but losing the first battle to the big bad, if you will. All those things.
I think we talked about, we might have referenced The Fifth Element before on this show. The fact that in The Fifth Element, Bruce Willis is the hero, Gary Oldman is the villain, and they never cross paths. Or they literally do, coming in and out of the same elevator in two different elevator carts, but they don't ever have a confrontation. And I think if you were doing an improvised show that had hero and villain, conventional genre tropes would say that you have to have a confrontation. Like, when is it okay to deviate from that on purpose, or because it doesn't seem to be leading that way?
Yeah, it's taking a step away from the traditional hero's journey is interesting because as an audience, like when we watch trailers for movies, we kind of know what we're going into, and some of the best movies are the ones where we totally think that we know what to expect and how it's going to end, but let's just see how they get there. We
Yeah.
kind of figure out we think going into when we buy a ticket, we know the story arc, and then we are wrong, and it's amazing. Cabin in the Woods is a really great example of that. Have you seen that?
Yeah. I love it.
I love Cabin in the Woods. Uh, Jen Hansen took me to it, and we were running late, and I was like, "I'm fine. I've seen enough horror movies to know like what's
Oh
good." She's like,
boy.
"No." She had already seen it, and she was so excited. She's like, "You got to see this!" Like, she made me go into the theater as she went and got the popcorn just because like I don't want you to miss anything, and I'm so glad she did.
Yeah.
And then you get those great moments like when they meet the oh god, what was his name? Like Ezekiel on the side of the road, the old
Yeah.
gas
Yep.
station operator, and then he calls like the headquarters, and they're messing with them.
Yeah. That's funny too, because in that movie, and I think also in Improv, because it is comedy, um, we want to use the tropes close enough to a T where it's suspicious how well it's happening, and there's something funny
Right.
about that, where it's like that, like it's just so consistent with the genre that I like, you know, that in itself is kind of funny when you're nailing the genre that well. It's almost a commentary on on those
Right.
genre that like, isn't it weird how this always happens?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think again, going back to just embracing that first and having fun with um those go-tos is the best way to start, not trying to shake your way out of it up front, but instead trying to lean into it. And every movie or story, um I always feel that even if I know the ending, I'm more interested in how it happens than
Right.
what happens. So it's like, yeah, all those same
And
elements aren't going to hold you back.
yeah, and as a performer in those, I think is always a fun choice when you have an unusual perspective on events that usually happen in these genres. So, like, not the best example, but I do like the show One Punch Man because he's a superhero who is so powerful he can destroy any enemy with one punch, and he's bored with his life. Like, usually the hero when he defeats, the monster that's destroying the city, there's like a celebration, and he feels he feels whole, but
Yeah,
because it's so easy to him, he feels less than. And I think that's a more unique take on the whole hero versus bad guy uh, story.
totally. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question here. And yeah, this one is about having a drink before the show. Um,
Yep.
is it okay to have a drink or two? Excuse me. Woo! Woo!
Zentai.
Sneeze out of nowhere.
Yeah, you look so surprised.
Oh, here it comes.
Ah!
The question is, should you, I think it was, do you have an easier time performing if you have a drink before the show, or stone cold sober? Which one is more or less difficult or easy? And yeah,
Yeah.
I like to have a drink before the show, relax, unwind, settle in. That's my preferred thing. So I guess like even out of habit, the answer would be that I have an easier time if I've done my ritual that way. Um,
Okay.
and when it comes to being stone cold sober during shows, I definitely like have done plenty of nighttime shows that were fine. Ones that are weird for me are like special occasions, like anniversary shows or New Year's
Yeah.
shows. And then doing it during the day too is weird. And I guess that has less to do with I guess the sobriety thing than it does with the fact that there's like sunlight beaming through the windows and you're like, I guess we're doing improv.
Yeah. Can you be funny before 7?
Yeah.
Again, I'm with you. I like having a drink. I don't, it's part of my ritual, but I don't attach the drink I have like with the show. I guess my only concern would be like, what's, it's a case by case scenario. Like, what is your relationship with alcohol? Because some people can have a drink and it doesn't really affect them. It might, chill them out a little bit. It might just be a ritual. It just be, you might be thirsty. Who knows? You might be singing that I'm a truck that and I can drive fast song and need to get out of your head. But if you're the kind of person who can't just have one, or maybe it affects your speech, because I know some people who are visibly drunk. You're not, not drunk, but visibly different when they have a couple drinks. So you might not want that version of yourself on stage. Can you perform 100% when you're on after a drink or two? That's a question you can only answer yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is absolutely about your relationship with alcohol at the very base level. Is like, if that's where the question is coming from, then like that's something you got to learn and be careful and conscious of.
Right.
Beyond that, as like a practice of professionalism or culture, whatever it is in the improv community, that I think that you don't want to be drunk and unable to perform, connect with your partners and the audience. So it's also about like knowing what type of, I guess that goes back to your relationship with alcohol, but like also knowing your limits and what, especially if you're like, I'll switch it up and I'll have a glass of wine. Are you a different wine buzzed or wine drunk than you are with beer or liquor? So if it doesn't get in your way and it makes you feel comfortable, go for it. I'm always a fan of getting to a venue super early, and specifically like 45 minutes to an hour ahead of showtime. And so sometimes I'll have one, maybe 2 drinks before a show. And I know that that's my limit. If I get there, a couple minutes earlier than normal, and I, an hour and a half, and I'm like thinking about that third beer, I know that it's a bad idea for me to do that before the show starts.
Right.
I can do 2 max and still perform playfully, intelligently, and in a way that's connected with the rest of the people in the room.
Yeah. I would say the same thing goes for weed, because I know people who can absolutely have I'm gonna sound like old man. Yeah, I don't really do it. So they can have the weed. Yeah, they can like eat like a handful of weed and then go on there and that's them. That's they have a balance where that is totally. But if I were to even watch someone smoke weed and try to perform, it would be a train wreck.
Yeah,
it'd be an audience watching.
I can't imagine doing it. I also don't smoke weed. I have enough to know that how it affects me, and that like if I really needed to go to bed is when I would smoke weed. I would never try to do anything. I just can't, like, I just know how I get. I'm just like, everything is just like melting and
I would
falling
have
apart.
to book the show in a way where the audience knows that I don't smoke weed, but if you want to watch what happens when I do and try to perform, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
So they're in on it. It's not
And we've done we've done shows like Drunk Prov, or I think maybe there's been a weed show before. I know that like I've heard stories of like the UCB guys being like, or maybe oh, maybe it was like Darcy Carden or Lauren Lapkus or somebody I heard in an interview that was like, we tried it because we thought it would be fun, and it just was such the opposite. It was so miserable, like would not do again, would not recommend.
Wow.
But and it's the same thing with drinking too. I think that drinking hits you not as hard, or at least in my experience. You know, one beer is not the same as one joint.
Yeah.
So yeah, with beer though, or alcohol, you only have to have it happen like once, maybe once every a couple times or whatever. Like it doesn't take much for you to be like, I definitely did not enjoy being drunk and improvising.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. Again, I guess just to make sure we're covering our bases with that, your disclaimer is like, it's about your relationship with alcohol.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe if you don't know what your relationship with alcohol is, check in with your coach. Check in with somebody. Like, how was it?
Yeah.
That show last night.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Final question before we go comes from our buddy Pete. He wants to know how we're both so handsome, and I don't have an answer, Pete, but I do know that
that ring light,
the lighting
is everything.
Love you, Pete. Okay, so that is going to do it for.
Okay. No, I was asking if there was a real question or
we don't. Well, that's it for our Q&A segment for this episode. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Improv FAQ. You can also find us on YouTube. Our channel is Improv FAQ, where you will find mini lectures as well as the Improv FAQ at Length series. The most up-to-date materials and content is going to be on YouTube. But you can also find us as a podcast where we have 20 episodes of Improv FAQ at Length available on audio wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us, and we are adding to that in batches until we get caught up and current with where we are on YouTube and Facebook. And once we do that, in theory, it won't matter where you find us. It'll all be the same content in a different form.
We'll be all over.
Yeah.
Helping you go to sleep and get ready.
Yeah. And if you do have questions to submit for topics, for recommended guests, or questions for these Q&As, you can send us an email at improvfaq@gmail.com, or you can direct message us on any of those platforms that we exist on. Thanks so much for joining, Tom. Yeah. Shout out to Tom.
Yeah, Tom.
And of course to Pete, who has not gotten a proper answer for his question. And maybe Brad. We will catch you next time on Improv FAQ at Length. Bye.
Bye.